For almost 10 years, I'd been standing at the front of the same classroom, guiding students through the worlds hidden in pages. My routine had become comfortable. Mornings began with the scratch of markers against whiteboards and the comforting smell of the tea I brewed each dawn. That particular morning unfolded like countless others before it. Golden light spilled across worn desks, tiny particles floating peacefully through the air, while my students arrived with their familiar blend of drowsiness and cautious anticipation. Then, someone new appeared. The memory remains vivid. A man who looked to be in his early 50s entered, which wasn't strange by itself. But something in his demeanor caught my attention, a quiet self-assurance mixed with uncertainty, as though he questioned whether this space was meant for him, yet refused to turn away. Silver threads wove through his hair, and his gaze held a gentleness that seemed to absorb everything with acceptance. He offered me a kind, somewhat reserved smile, and a subtle greeting, and suddenly the space between us seemed to contract, becoming more personal. Class commenced as we all found our places. My usual discussions centered on affection and grief in timeless novels, but this time I observed him absorbing every word with unusual focus. Occasionally our glances intersected, and he would offer the smallest acknowledgement, silently conveying comprehension of my meaning. And something struck me that hadn't in ages. I felt truly recognized. When the session ended, he remained near the entrance. Most learners hurried toward their next obligation, but he paused, visibly summoning his nerves. "Pardon me," he spoke gently. "I hope this isn't intrusive, but might we speak briefly?" I indicated the vacant room adjacent to ours, and we moved inside. The space carried traces of dust and the fading warmth of daylight. I observed how his hands folded with nervous energy before him, his fingertips brushing the cover of a journal he held. I needed to express. He started, and I sensed an unexpected surge of interest. "That your session today awakened memories I'd nearly lost reasons. I originally chose to pursue literature. It's been so long since anyone helped me feel that my history held value." I found myself momentarily speechless. His words carried authenticity, a genuine openness that didn't demand attention but rather sought understanding. "I'm grateful to hear that," I responded eventually, my tone gentler than typical. "That's precisely why teaching matters to me. Witnessing someone reclaim what's meaningful, it's profound." He smiled again, that same thoughtful, contemplative expression, and briefly, the commotion beyond these walls seemed to disappear. Something warm existed between us, a mutual acknowledgement of shared perspective, and an implicit understanding that this meeting wouldn't simply vanish. As he prepared to depart, he turned back and said, almost hesitantly, "I hope I'm not overstepping, but I'd appreciate continuing our conversation, perhaps following another class, if you'd consider it." I observed him leave, experiencing both intrigue and something more substantial, a sensation I hadn't anticipated at this point in my existence, and instinctively, I understood this marked the start of something neither of us could have foreseen. The following session felt altered, though physically nothing in the classroom had changed. Sunlight continued streaming through tall panes, and familiar scents of dust and aging paper remained suspended in the atmosphere. But now an underlying current of expectation existed, a subtle awareness that something fundamental had evolved between us. He entered several minutes ahead of schedule, choosing the identical seat toward the front. I attempted concentrating on my materials, but repeatedly noticed how he surveyed the space, absorbing minor elements, patterns of illumination across surfaces, students adjusting in their seats, the gentle mechanical hum overhead. His presence possessed an attentiveness that captivated me effortlessly. Following the lecture, the room cleared almost entirely, corridor noise diminished, and abruptly we were alone. He lingered at the doorway momentarily, seemingly gathering resolve again, then stepped forward. "I've been reflecting on yesterday's conversation," he began, his voice measured and thoughtful, "about rediscovering my reasons for pursuing literature. It's more complex than I realized. I hadn't understood how deeply I'd concealed its existence, obligations, duties, and then your lecture showed me it's acceptable to desire something personally meaningful." I acknowledged him, experiencing a wave of understanding. I perceived the burden he'd shouldered, years of suppressing his own aspirations to fulfill responsibilities. "We easily forget we're permitted to value our interests," I said quietly, "particularly when life grows demanding, but recognizing it, that's where transformation begins." He smiled subtly, almost bashfully. Then, surprisingly, he retrieved his journal. "I composed something last evening," he he explained. Just a brief reflection. I rarely share these, but I valued your perspective. I felt simultaneous astonishment and curiosity. This gesture contained trust, an openness that required reverence. He extended the journal, and as I read, I discovered his words possessed unexpected depth and sensitivity. He'd written about absence, remembrance, and the gentle possibility of renewal. I could sense the feeling beneath each sentence. When I raised my eyes, our gazes connected, and momentarily, we were simply two individuals exchanging something deeply intimate. This is remarkable, I murmured. You possess an ability to express feelings many spend lifetimes attempting to comprehend. He colored slightly, visibly self-conscious yet gratified. Thank you. I didn't imagine anyone would truly perceive it. And in that instant, I grasped something significant, not solely about him, but about myself. Years had passed since I'd experienced this type of connection, the kind that isn't hurried or manufactured, but develops naturally, organically. His presence held a peaceful intensity, a sincere transparency that made me want to listen, to become part of his narrative. We conversed for nearly 60 minutes, our discussion wandering from novels to existence, to quiet revelations and gentle amusement. No criticism existed. No demands, only mutual appreciation and a shared recognition of being understood. When he ultimately departed, the room felt simultaneously emptier and somehow richer. As I collected my belongings, I understood this encounter was teaching me something unexpected at this phase of life. That significant connections could still astonish you, even when you believe you understand what to anticipate. And sometimes the most meaningful discoveries emerge in the quietest, most unassuming instances. The period following our extended conversation felt transformed, almost charged with peaceful anticipation I hadn't known in years. I discovered myself observing details: how he paused by the window before sessions began, the contemplative intervals he took before responding to questions, the subtle fragrance that seemed to remain after his departure. It wasn't something I expected to register, yet there it was, affecting me in ways I couldn't dismiss. One afternoon, following another lecture filled with literary discussion and soft laughter, he remained afterward again. This time he brought no journal. He simply leaned against the doorway, hands resting loosely in his pockets, eyes surveying the space as if collecting courage for his words. I've been contemplating considerably, he said quietly, about our discussions, and how uncommon it is to encounter someone who genuinely listens, not merely processes words, but comprehends their meaning. I didn't recognize I needed this until meeting you. His words carried sincerity, unhurried delivery, holding significance that made me pause. I had guided countless students, but something in his manner, his presence, felt distinct, personal, almost delicate, in ways that demanded consideration. I understand, I whispered. It's uncommon for me as well. Existence becomes so consuming that we forget authentic connection. But when it occurs, it's extraordinary. He moved nearer, just slightly, and I noticed the subtle warmth radiating from him, the gentle rhythm of his breathing. No urgency existed, no expectations, only peaceful intimacy that seemed to envelop us like the soft afternoon illumination streaming through glass. I'm uncertain how to express this without seeming naive, he continued, but conversing with you has awakened something within me: optimism, intrigue, a desire to explore aspects of myself I'd abandoned. I felt a tremor of recognition. That identical stirring had been developing inside me, quiet excitement balanced by caution. We were both navigating unfamiliar paths, yet trust was forming, fragile but unmistakable. You're not naive, I said softly. I believe that's precisely what happens when we permit ourselves to be recognized. We remember our authentic selves beyond the roles we perform daily. For several moments, we simply remained there, allowing silence to communicate. The sunlight shifted, bathing the room in amber tones, and I felt the significance of the moment. How rare to encounter someone whose presence felt simultaneously like reflection and possibility. Then, almost instinctively, he extended his hand toward mine. It was a gentle touch, tentative yet intentional, as though requesting permission without requiring language. I didn't retreat. Instead, I allowed my fingers to meet his, experiencing an electric warmth transcending physical contact. It was a connection of spirits, of comprehension, of two people recognizing each other in ways that didn't require explanation. We conversed for hours that afternoon, exchanging stories we'd never voiced, laughing gently at memories carrying both sweetness and sorrow, discovering new dimensions of ourselves through the process. By the time he finally left, the sun hung low, creating lengthy shadows across the classroom surfaces. I remained seated briefly, hands still tingling from our touch, and recognized that something profound had transformed, not just between us, but within me. I had presumed I understood the boundaries of my existence, the limitations of my capacity for feeling, but encountering him had revealed a doorway I hadn't known existed, and for the first time, in considerable duration, I felt that existence could astonish me in the most beautiful and unexpected fashions. The subsequent days felt almost ethereal. Our conversations had evolved into a quiet tradition. Following sessions, we'd remain in that sunlit classroom, exchanging thoughts, memories, and small revelations we hadn't shared with others. No urgency existed. No need to define anything. Just steadily growing trust that transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary. One late afternoon, the sky beyond displayed gentle shades of coral and lavender, and the classroom was immersed in warm radiance. He stayed afterward again, leaning casually against the window ledge, and I noticed how the light illuminated the silver in his hair. He regarded me with that same gentle intensity, and momentarily, words seemed unnecessary. "I've been considering," he said finally, his voice low and composed, "how rare this connection is, how uncommon to discover someone who comprehends without criticism, who listens without attempting to repair everything." I nodded, feeling the significance of his statement. I know, it's been identical for me. I hadn't realized how much I needed this until it manifested. He stepped closer, and this time no hesitation existed. We were both conscious of the quiet tension that had been developing for weeks, a tension that wasn't merely attraction, but understanding, respect, and something deeper, an emotional intimacy that made everything else recede. "I don't wish to accelerate anything," he continued, "but I also refuse to ignore what exists here. With you, I feel permitted to be completely myself, and I want to explore that if you're willing." I felt warmth spreading through me, a mixture of surprise and certainty. "I'm willing," I said softly, my voice nearly a whisper yet resolute. "I want that equally. I believe we both deserve this, whatever it becomes." We sat together then, side by side, sharing peaceful closeness that wasn't about dramatic gestures, but about presence. We discussed literature, existence, aspirations we had long stored away. We laughed gently at the complexities of adulthood, and we permitted ourselves vulnerability, knowing the trust between us was strengthening with each shared narrative. At one point, he reached for my hand again, and this time I didn't simply allow him to hold it. I interlaced our fingers, experiencing both comfort and electricity in our connection. The classroom, the sunlight, the faint scent of dust, they all seemed to dissolve into background, leaving only us, suspended in a moment of understanding and tenderness. By the time he finally departed, the sky had deepened into dusk, the warm glow replaced by gentle shadows. I remained behind briefly, gazing at the empty seats and the sunlight fading across surfaces, reflecting on what had just unfolded. I recognized that existence possessed a way of astonishing us, even when we believe we've experienced everything, even when we believe we've outgrown hope. Meeting him had reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that emotional connection, mutual respect, and genuine understanding could open pathways in ways nothing else could. I felt a sense of peace, quiet joy, and anticipation for the journey ahead. Knowing this unexpected, deeply emotional experience had changed me, awakened something I didn't even realize I had lost, and as I departed the classroom that evening, I carried with me the memory of his smile, the touch of his hand, and the promise that existence, even at this stage, still held surprises capable of touching the heart in ways that endure forever.